Are you smarter than an antelope? And if so, where are the hungry hyenas? Coming to you straight from Studio 14, this is Healing with Words. I have been fascinated with neuroscience. The idea that the brain can study itself, just that thought is to me very exciting. And so that is one of the things that my bride and I share is our love for neuroscience, neurology, and neuropsychology. Well, just recently, my bride was listening to a podcast, and the podcaster had a guest. And the guest was writer Brent Hansen, who writes who wrote the book Unoffendable. And for those of you who are watching this on video, there's the book right there with Brent Hansen. And for those of you who are just on Spotify, I'm sorry, but it's, we got it from, the regular sources. And all she had to do was, we use texts as post-it notes. We do not deal with important things through text because, as I've mentioned before, you shouldn't. But anyway, she sent me a text, and she said, the text was very clear, get me this book. And then it had an actual link to the Amazon of getting her the book. And I'm like, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And then I went out, ordered it, and then I asked her later about it. And she told me about this particular writer. And so we decided we were going to read it together at nighttime. So let me first of all ask this question. How many of you have ever gone to like Village Inn and had the French silk pie? Now, I have not had a lot of French silk pie, but if you were to place a whole French silk pie in front of me, and just, I guess, turn around so you wouldn't look at me, I would, without a doubt, eat the whole thing. Because if I'm going to die, and I want a death by chocolate kind of deal, and the French silk pie is that to me. Well, this particular book, as we're reading through it, I liken it to French silk pie. And it has 26 chapters, and we've had to slice this French silk pie, this book, one slice at a time, so we can really enjoy it every single night as we read one chapter, because it is without a doubt delicious. Every single chapter is just delicious. And so if you want to get a laugh, if you want to grow, I was describing this book to someone close to me, and I said it's basically it's basically fertilizer, that would really make you grow very quickly, because it's really chock full of things for you to grow spiritually. And so one of the things I like about this author is he writes kind of like me. And so chapter 14, he called it, and I quote, this is a chapter about how we're just barely smart enough to be stupid. And pretty much every chapter has interesting titles like that. And in it, he talks about antelopes and hyenas. And I wanted to mention this to you because, in my latest book, F41.1, Anxiety, Fear Not, I talk about, I believe it's chapter 7, if I'm not mistaken. I talk about what is real and what is imagined. And I touched on this, on that particular point, which I think is a very good point when it comes to the subject of anxiety. But I wish I had read this book before I wrote that book, because I would have I would have directed people to this particular story. And so let me tell the story about antelopes and hyenas. And of course, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to read it straight from this book. This is inspired by the story that he told. And yes, I'm going to add, I'm going to subtract, but all the credit really for the idea goes to Brant Hampson. And so here it is. You and I were designed with our brains. Part of our brains is the limbic system, and that is one of the parts of the limbic system, which is the most primitive part of our brain, is the amygdala. And think of, for the intents and purposes of this, think of it as a radar that is constantly looking for threats, because it's what, I was talking to someone. It's as far as I know, and I could be wrong. Don't email me about this. But the one phrase that to me seems to appear in all 9 of the canonical movies of Star Wars is the following phrase: "I have a funny feeling about this." And so it is the amygdala, the one that says, I got a funny feeling about this. Now, Bill, you're probably in danger. I should probably look into this. And so it's something that, it's an ability that we have that supposedly helped us when it comes to survive and stay out of danger. And it is something that the animals were designed to have also, so they could also stay out of danger. And so picture an antelope, and this antelope is just roaming around in some field, in some jungle, somewhere. And it's minding its own business and munching on the grass, and a cute little antelope. And all of a sudden he hears, or has a feeling, and he looks up, and he sees, not too far from him, a pack of hungry hyenas. Now at that moment, the amygdala kicks in and says, okay, buddy, you better shift it into B for boogie, all right? Because you don't want to be hyena lunch. And so the idea is the amygdala senses the danger, and it shoots all this adrenaline and cortisol through the body of the antelope, giving him the ability to just book it. And so, because this is a life and death situation, this is a do or die. If you don't want to be hyena lunch, you have to run faster than these guys, right? And so the antelope just takes off, and maybe faking left, going right, and moving here, moving that, whatever. And then the muscles have this jet fuel of the adrenaline, combination of adrenaline and cortisol or whatever, and he's running, literally running for his life, while the hyenas are chasing him. Well, let's say for the purpose of the story, he gets away, and the hyenas don't catch him. And so at that moment, he gets to relax his system. So his amygdala can just relax, he can kick back, and then bring it down to a regular baseline. I've also thought about the fact that, if you're driving a car, whatever car, the little dial on the left to the speedometer is the RPM, the revolutions per minute. And the engines of the cars were designed to run at some very low levels of RPMs. Now, if you happen to be on an interstate highway and you want to pass someone, you will, punch the gas, put your foot on the gas, and open the gas valve wide open. You have all this gas going through, and then the engine begins to roar, and you just zooming, right? Well, and then the RPM kind of goes, and it starts going at very high rates. Now, the idea is you're going as fast as you can. The engine is kicking it to high RPMs, and then once you pass the car, and then you're in a safe place, and the idea is for you to kind of go down, go from like to, and you want to keep it low, right? And I've asked people, now, if you were to keep the RPMs running high for a considerable amount of time, what would happen? And of course, if you know anything about engines, the answer is your engine is just going to blow. Why is that, Abbas? Well, because the engines were not designed to be running at high RPMs. And I thought, that's very interesting, because just like the engines were not designed to run at high RPMs, we were not designed to run at high RPMs. The antelope in this case is minding its own business, is at low RPMs, sees the hyenas, right, and just books it, and then after he's saved, then he goes back down. Brilliant, right? Are you smarter than an antelope? And so if I were to ask you, for example, are you smarter than an antelope? I think it's safe to assume that you would say, well, of course. Yeah, so you are considerably smarter than an antelope, correct? And they would say, well, yes. I mean, you are far more intelligent than an antelope, correct? And they would say, well, yeah, Bill, where are you going with this? And then this is brilliant, because the author then brings it to this point. He says, isn't it funny how, and again, this is in my words, I'm not quoting him, isn't it funny how we who are smarter and more intelligent than antelopes and have this system of the adrenaline and the cortisol to protect us from harm, protects us from life and death situation, for the most part, by a huge margin, our amygdala and our system goes off often, sometimes on a daily basis, due to nothing. Seriously, unimagined things. And while my patients they've been kind of looking at me, kind of processing this truth, I asked them, tell me the last time that you had a near-death experience where this system in the limbic system, where the alarm system of the amygdala and the adrenaline and cortisol, whatever, where that was justified. And for the most part, I mean, I've had my patients say like, well, I never. Or, well, maybe months ago or years ago, or maybe when I was younger. And so seldom do we justify this alarm system of the amygdala going into DEFCON, 1, from DEFCON 5 to 1, and then the cortisol, the adrenaline, and whatever. Seldom does that happen. And most of the time when it happens, when we get anxious, when we worry, when we have panic attacks, when all of that stuff happens, is, and I would dare to say 99% of the time, based on nothing at all. Just stuff that we imagine. We imagine these hyenas are chasing us and are going to kill us when they're not. Yeah, and the thing about the amygdala that you need to understand is that it cannot differentiate, because it's so primitive, it cannot differentiate between you just worrying about a test that's coming up, or a project, or meeting a new person, or whatever, or you're an antelope being chased by hyenas. It cannot differentiate between those two. And so, if you were to be smarter than an antelope and exclusively aim towards having your alarm system of the amygdala and the cortisol and the adrenaline to go off only on emergency situations, on life and death, do or die, imagine what your life would really be like. But we manufacture our own hungry hyenas. We manufacture our own, hungry bears who are chasing us. So, if you are smarter than an antelope, and I hope that you are, then ask yourself, where are the hyenas? Look around you as you begin to feel like, I need to worry about this, I need to, I think I'm going to have a panic attack, and what if, and what if, and what if, and what if. And in the book, I talked about marinating in the what if. So I'm not going to talk about that here. But as you're sensing yourself going into that, look around. Where are the hyenas? Where's the life and death situation? Is it do or die? And if it isn't, and I would bet you, for the most part, you don't have that, then just let your amygdala know, by the way, I am not an antelope, and I'm not being chased by hyenas. This is all my imagination. This is all in my head. This is all pretend. What would your life be like? Mommy, we're looking about anxiety-free, stress-free. Wow, just imagine. That would be really sweet. I'm Bill Cruz, and this is Healing with Words. See you next time.